Introduction. Israel is a modern secular state located in the Holy Land. Like all other secular states in the world today, its economic system is based on riba. Riba is usually translated as usury, the lending of money on interest, regardless of the rate of interest. But the definition of riba in Islam also includes transactions that are based on deception and which give to the deceiver a profit or gain to which he is not justly entitled. In American vocabulary, such a transaction is described as a rip-off. If judgment were to be made according to the religion of Abraham alayhi al-salam, then we ask the following. What would be the religious legitimacy of an Israel which is located in the Holy Land and whose economy is based on riba? Does it conform with or violate the divine conditions established for inheritance of the Holy Land? The world economy today. A basic characteristic of the economy around the world today is that wealth no longer circulates throughout the economy. Rather, wealth now circulates only amongst the wealthy. In consequence, around the world, the rich are now permanently rich, and the poor are imprisoned in permanent poverty. Secondly, the rich keep on growing richer, as they literally suck the blood of the masses, while the poor descend into such destitution as brings in its wake anarchy, violence, immense suffering, and the destruction of faith and values. Imagine all of mankind to be aboard a ship. A small minority who are permanently rich and who are constantly growing richer are traveling first class in unprecedented luxury and security. They have permanent first-class tickets. The rich rule the ship. They use their wealth to control politics. Democracy on board that ship becomes the rule of the rich, and for the rich in what amounts to financial prostitution. But the rich do not themselves directly rule. Rather, they do it by proxy and deception in the form of support that they extend to popular politicians and political parties, over whom they then exercise invisible control. That is a true description of the political economy of the world today. And it is the European Jews in Britain and USA who have perfected this method of gaining power and control over the people. To his credit, Henry Ford was able to recognize the sinister development in human history. Most of the rest of mankind are imprisoned in permanent poverty and are condemned to travel below the deck down in the hold of the ship in ever-increasing squalor, poverty, destitution, misery, and suffering. They are condemned to work for slave wages so that others may live off their sweat. They also live in ever-increasing insecurity, with constant burglaries, violence, shootings, killings, and rape of women in neighborhoods infested with drugs and drug dealers. Those traveling first class have access to clean drinking water and to the best medical health services that money can buy. Those below deck, down in the hold, are forced to drink polluted water full of bacteria. They are forced to eat food and drink milk laced with chemicals and hormones. Increasingly, they must also eat genetically altered food. They fall ill but cannot afford the cost of medical treatment. They live miserable lives and die miserable deaths. In fact, the world economy is a new, sophisticated form of economic slavery, but it operates by way of awesome deception. First of all, although those who control the economy around the world preach a gospel of the free and fair market, they themselves violate the free market by imposing legal obligations on people to accept the use of fraudulent artificial paper money as legal tender. And paper money constantly loses value. As poverty increases and deepens, they impose price controls on basic necessities such as food, etc., and minimum wage legislation upon the labor market. They do so in order to avert the possibility that the hungry, suffering masses would rise up in rebellion against the government and the predatory elite. They also do so in order to avert the possibility that the masses would recognize their new slavery. The deception extends beyond the above. Many of the poor look at those traveling first class and are convinced that such people and their way of life represent heaven itself, and they long to go to that heaven. They are unable to understand the system of oppression and how it works. Others among the poor respond to their economic oppression with blind rage and resort to acts of violence directed against all those who have some wealth and who are in authority. The poor all believe that they live in hell, and they imitate the way of life of those traveling first classes in the belief that it represents a taste of heaven. Such a ship deserves to be sunk with all aboard. Cuban President Fidel Castro, like Ivan Illich Energy and Equity, described the world economy in similar language. Never before did mankind have such formidable scientific and technologic potential, such extraordinary capacity to produce riches and well-being, but never before were disparity and inequity so profound in the world. He responded to this economic oppression by declaring that another Nuremberg is required to judge the unjust economic order. Text of his presidential address, Summit Conference, Group of 77, Havana, September 2000. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to the world an economic order that was free from economic injustice and oppression. No one worked for slave wages. Wealth did not circulate only amongst the wealthy, but rather throughout the economy. The rich were not permanently rich, and the poor were not permanently poor. The market was a free and a fair market. No one could reap without planting. Money had intrinsic value, and so it could not be manipulated by banks and by a predatory elite to reduce its value. In consequence, such a market and economy never experienced inflation. No prices were fixed, including the price of labor. Social welfare was achieved in the form of a compulsory tax on wealth that was used to provide for those who did not possess the basic necessities of life. But the value system of the society ensured that the effort would be made by those who were capable of such effort to extricate themselves from having to live off that charity. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam succeeded where every government in the world today has failed. He succeeded because he enforced the divine prohibition of riba, usury or lending and borrowing money on interest, and he maintained the integrity of money by using real money rather than artificial money, paper and plastic money. In addition, he enforced a penal code that gave deterrent punishment to those found guilty of theft, but the world rejected him, and Muslims abandoned his economic sunnah. And so, the world is condemned to live with today's dulm oppression and fasad, that is, the corruption and destruction of the free and fair market. All around the world today, that economic oppression exists and is constantly increasing. The rich growing richer and the poor growing poorer. In USA, for example, Black America is both miserably and permanently poor, while white America is permanently rich. The US economy dazzles the non-white world, and white Americans have never had it better. But in this country, wealth circulates only amongst the wealthy, while the number of poor who live on welfare, public charity keeps on constantly growing. White Western civilization wants us to believe that theirs is the most advanced and progressive model of an economy has ever been the good fortune of mankind to experience. And one-eyed, brainwashed Muslim mimic men are busy trying to ensure that the world of Islam emulates the West. In fact, that predatory American and white Western dream is fertilized with the blood of the masses around the world, and with the wealth that is constantly being skimmed off an unsuspecting, ignorant mankind. Our purpose is to explain how it is done. White Western civilization, as well as the non-white laboring masses around the world, and indeed, non-European Jews, can only benefit if they pay heed to the explanation here presented and accept the Quran as the word of Allah and Muhammad alayhi al-salam as the messenger of Allah before it is too late. Our thesis is that the same people who engineered the political transformation of European civilization, and through imitation, the rest of the world, into an essentially godless world, are the same people who seduced the non-European Jews into supporting the restoration of the Jewish state of Israel. They are the people who increasingly control the wealth of the world through their evil genius in controlling and manipulating the fraudulent international monetary system and the riba-based banking and insurance system around the world. They have even surpassed the traditional non-European Jews, the people who attempted to crucify Jesus alayhi al-salam at their own game of riba. Our view is that the evil genius who is at work in all of this is that strange European who first became a Jew and then proceeded to hijack Judaism. The Noble Quran not only explains the world today, but also explains its economic oppression. The Quran, which is a book of wisdom, and this includes economic wisdom, has established rules ensuring that wealth does not circulate only amongst the wealthy. What Allah has bestowed on His messenger and taken away from the people of the townships belongs to Allah, to His messenger and to kindred and orphans, the needy and the wayfarer, in order that wealth may not only circulate amongst the wealthy among you. So take what the messenger assigns to you, and deny yourselves that which he withholds from you, and fear Allah, for Allah is strict in punishment. Quran, Al-Hashr, 59-7. Muslims have abandoned the rules of the Quran and, as a consequence, they now pay a terrible price for their folly. A new, sophisticated and deceptive economic slavery is descending upon them, as well as upon the rest of non-European humanity. The shameful irony in this is clear when we remember that one of the basic functions of Islam in the world is to liberate the oppressed. What is the cause of this global economic oppression? It is riba, a predatory global elite centered in the Jewish-controlled banking centers in the West, but also present around the world, is constantly sucking the wealth and the blood of mankind and impoverishing the laboring masses through riba. The oppressor creates political, legislative, judicial, and legal systems, the media, etc., with consummate deception, and he ensures that they all fulfill the basic function of preserving the system of economic oppression. The film industry, television, the internet, modern music, designer clothing, etc., are used to transport the masses to fantasy land so that they remain in a state of blissful ignorance, while riba is used to control and enslave them. The ultimate objective of their mastermind, Dajjal, the false messiah, is to enslave all of mankind, and, through poverty and destitution, and through wealth which has been obtained corruptly, to subject faith in Allah Most High, and the religious way of life, to the ultimate test and trial. The evidence to date already confirms that most Muslims, the predatory rich as well as the miserable poor, are failing that test of faith. Dajjal's second objective is to deceive Jews and lead them to their ultimate destruction. An objective appraisal of the modern world, and in particular, the Holy Land, must deliver the conclusion that that objective has already almost been achieved. Dajjal is well on his way to completing his mission, in which he delivers to the Jews absolute control over the whole world. When Israel becomes the ruling state and completes a period of time of a day that would be like a week, Dajjal would himself appear and rule the world from Jerusalem, and so would complete his mission of impersonating the true Messiah. It should be a cause for serious concern, if not alarm, that a world which still comprises many civilizations, some of which are thousands of years old, should be embraced not only by the same secular political system based on shirk, but also by the same secular economy based on riba. The economic weapon of riba complements the political weapon of the modern secular state and the United Nations organization through which Dajjal successfully pursues his mission of achieving political and economic control over the entire world. Our method is to first explain the importance of the subject, and then, subsequently, to explain the verses of the Quran which deal with the subject of riba, and the ahadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Finally, we will attempt to explain riba at work in the modern economy. We will finally attempt to examine the validity of the state of Israel in the Holy Land, an Israel whose economy is based on riba. What is riba? Riba is usury. Usury is now commonly understood as the lending of money at illegally high rates of interest. But this deliberate corruption of terminology took place in Europe in order to permit the moneylender, now called banker, to bypass the Christian Church and its objection to all forms of usury. R.W. Tawney wrote a classic book in 1935 entitled Religion and the Rise of Capitalism, in which he described the prolonged Euro-Christian opposition to riba. William Shakespeare also did the same. In his classic play, The Merchant of Venice, riba in Islam as in medieval Christianity is the lending of money on interest, regardless of the rate of interest. When a money lender lends money on interest, then money by itself, independent of any labor or effort, or the assumption of any risk by the investor, increases over time. The increase is realized by deception through the exploitation of labor, goods, and property. This becomes clear when attention is directed to that which Allah has unambiguously declared in the Quran. Man is entitled to nothing except that for which he labored. Quran Al-Naim, 53-39. Thus, the Quran rejects the claim that money can increase over time. One of the ways through which that exploitation takes place is the consequent decrease in the value of wages, of goods, and of property over time, something that Allah has specifically prohibited. In several verses of the Quran, the Prophet Shu'aib constantly warned his people of the wickedness of their economic life. Do not deprive people of what is rightfully theirs by diminishing the value of their things such as their labor, merchandise, property, etc. Quran Al-Araf, 7-85, Hud, 11-85, Al-Shura, 26-183, etc.